Prince Harry and Meghan Markle hiding? Yes, their tour of Colombia was probably one of the most disgusting displays of propaganda I've seen because there were no media outlets allowed to access pretty much any of the events. Only Harper's Bazaar was allowed one journalist. There was also one photographer. We got videos with zero sound. Well, why is that? What are Harry and Meghan hiding? Because, of course, the king and queen of fighting against misinformation, like they wouldn't misinform us, right? Well, I think that's wrong because really at the end of the day, if you don't want any sort of accountability from the media, even though you're making such overt displays, you could say, of wealth, influence, and those sorts of things, it's pretty obvious that you're more interested in propaganda than you are in telling the truth. And that's definitely the case with Harry and Meghan here. I have never seen something like this in the royal space. And yes, Harry and Meghan are, of course, cosplay royals, but every time they use that royal title and then they twist what royals do, it sets up a bad precedence that will follow the rest of the royals. And I think it's incredibly important to tell the truth of what royals are supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. And why Harry and Meghan, what they did is essentially propaganda straight out of North Korea. Like this was Kim Jong-un level propaganda. He would be so proud of Harry and Meghan. And I'm going to tell you why that is and why this is so important that this doesn't happen again. If Harry and Meghan are going to do these kind of things, and if they're not going to let the media in, then the media shouldn't go. And yes, I'm talking about them and discussing them, but it's so incredibly important to push back against their misinformation campaign. Yes, but if you guys haven't been to Royal News Network before, my name is Brittany. I provide y'all compelling royal commentary. So if you want to hit that subscribe button, that would be absolutely fantastic. Now, if you're tired of the propaganda of Harry and Meghan, I have an event that is very fun, that is a tour-ish, but no propaganda included. And that is one to the Christmas markets in Europe in December. We are doing this from December 15th through 22nd. And we are going to Berlin, Dresden, and Prague. And if you don't know, that is Germany and the Czech Republic. So if you're interested in making new friends, seeing gorgeous parts of the world around Christmas time and getting a bit of Christmas cheer and some really, really unique gifts for your family and friends, feel free to check out the link up above. We would absolutely love to have you join us. And the window to join is closing. We only have a couple of months left because it ends on October 16th as the last day to sign up. And I know that seems far away, but it's approaching quickly, which is startling. It's approaching really quickly. So if you guys are interested in that, again, feel free to check out the link. Harry and Meghan have a problem with the truth. They don't really like it. They don't like anybody questioning them. They don't like anybody criticizing them. They don't like anybody going against their particular narrative. And this was on complete and full display in Colombia to, I think, pretty disturbing results. Harry and Meghan don't want anybody hanging around them who they don't authorize, who might say something critical. In fact, according to the Daily Mail, journalists who said something critical were kicked off a WhatsApp that was set up by the vice president for the coverage of the event. They were forced to stay outside events. They couldn't ask any questions. People get frustrated. And you got to wonder why. Well, Harry and Meghan, they got secrets they want to keep. They got secrets they want to hold. I think one of the big ones, of course, of this trip is that Meghan Markle is not really fluent at all in Spanish and doesn't really speak it. She can memorize a couple of words, but she can't really speak it. So go ahead and take a listen to this little bit, this video here where somebody asks her a question and she kind of just smiles and moves on because she doesn't really know what the woman is saying. So yes, Meghan Markle, she put on a good display towards the end, but she's not really speaking Spanish. I think the other issue, of course, is that Harry and Meghan, I don't think, are necessarily doing super well in their relationship. So the more they can control the media, the more they can conceal that. Because Nigeria was very different. It felt like there were a lot more news outlets around them, a lot more information got out. And this time it feels like it's just a black hole. There's like nothing there. You couldn't even find certain videos, and the short videos you could find, which were a minute, by the way, were completely devoid of sound. You couldn't even hear what they were saying, what they were talking about. And the first question, of course, this raises, which Harry and Meghan apparently are completely inept at realizing, is that people are going to wonder why. Because it looks like you're hiding something. You might not be, but it looks like you are. And that's not necessarily super smart for two people who want other governments to invite them in. The only governments now that you're sure they'll attract. Again, as governments more like North Korea, where hiding things, propaganda, concealing information is just part of life there. Harry and Meghan, of course, are fully embracing that because, I mean, again, there could be a variety of reasons I mentioned too, but it was just clear they didn't want any news outlets going anywhere near anything they were doing. And this was covered in the Daily Mail and the Telegraph. And these are so important to go over because, again, I don't know how much people understand how sometimes people not giving you information is so indicative of them wanting to conceal information. When you look at news outlets and media and everything like that, there are certain things sometimes certain outlets won't tell you, not because it's not true, not because it's not verified, just because they don't want to say X because it goes against whatever beliefs they particularly have. Listening to, and this is not to get political, but this is just actually kind of sort of the truth. When listening to everything going on during the Donald Trump attempted assassination attempt, it was startling to watch journalists try to bounce around and not say that he was shot. I was like listening to it going, I think he was shot, right? And they're like bouncing around saying, oh, it could have been an air gun. Could have been so many different things. And they meandered around it. I was like, but if it was a different candidate, would you not be saying different things? And I think they would. And that's not to get political. That's just to say, why aren't you telling me the truth? Why can't you say whatever the truth is? Why are you concealing it? Why are you downplaying it? So many different things. Just share the truth. But that's not necessarily totally where journalism is anymore. And Harry and Meghan are definitely banking on that on this tour. So let's look at this Daily Mail article. This is from Ian Gallagher. And I think he was a guy who tried, like, he was there. I think he was in a video there going, he was outside going, well, we're here. They went inside. They came out. We got nothing. So he says, normally walkabouts are pleasant. And the Queen, obviously decided to do walkabouts for a great thing. Those are somewhat newer things for the royals to do. But Harry and Meghan do things differently. As their Colombia sojourn demonstrated, they preferred as little interaction with the public as possible. So for a couple who claim to want to be so personable, so friendly and everything, they didn't really want to interact with any members of the Colombian public. And it seems that on the rare occasions the Duke and Duchess do meet ordinary folk, they aim to ensure their exchanges aren't overheard. So tightly controlled was their faux royal tour that the video of these all too brief encounters was released to the media without sound. And that, again, is incredibly disturbing. It might have been instructive, for instance, to hear what the couple said to pupils during a visit to a school in Bogota on the first day of their tour. Instead, the video only showed their lips moving. The next day, there was more of the same when Harry played sit-down volleyball with the Invictus Games athletes in the capital. How different to a near-identical event 3 months earlier in Nigeria when reporters were privy to the Duke's every word. And it might have been nice to hear the couple celebrating African culture during their visit to Plenque de San Basilio. Again, I did that wrong. A village founded by former slaves 4 centuries ago. The Sussex's silent movies didn't exactly sit neatly with Meghan's sermonizing on self-expression during a forum on Afro women and power. For instance, on the last day of the tour, no matter having stepped down from royal duties 4 years ago, perhaps they feel the normal rules don't apply. And the reasons for this lack of transparency aren't immediately clear. While the Duke and Duchess are apt to wash their dirty linen in public, I think the soul-bearing Oprah Winfrey interview and Harry's tell-all memoir is not as if they're in the habit of divulging state secrets to well-wishers. Yeah, so yes, they have nothing to divulge because they don't really do anything anymore. So why in the world the secrecy effort? Because that, again, comes across badly. It doesn't look like you're trying to protect people. It looks like you want to keep a secret, that you're trying to bar people from reporting what's really going on. And I think that's actually what Harry and Meghan were doing. They didn't want any reporters talking about things they didn't like. Because, I mean, and the thing is, too, it's if Harry and Meghan gave decent information, maybe that would have worked. But even if you look on their website, the banal nothingness that they shared about each individual visit was both self-promotional and devoid of any context, factual information, any quotes from anybody but Harry and Meghan, and any really details on interactions, except for the fact that they wanted to exchange multiple times that Harry and Meghan spoke Spanish. I mean, I guess I'm sure they said hola and gracias, but I don't think that's actually speaking Spanish. But that's what Harry and Meghan did. That's what they promoted because they don't really want an accountability. They don't want any transparency. They want to do whatever they want, which of course is what I posited in a recent video, is that it's been revealed through this whole thing that what Harry and Meghan, wanted wasn't privacy, it was control. And I understand somewhat controlling the images and information that gets out about your private life. But when you're so desperately trying to mimic what you had before, you're not doing the things they're doing. And it comes across as incredibly secretive and dangerous. So the next bit says, and this is incredibly critical, abundantly apparent on this tour, however, was a desire to ensure their engagements received as little outside scrutiny as possible. To that end, they selected a trusted magazine writer to accompany them and deliver unfailingly flattering accounts of their activities to the rest of the media, which at best got an occasional fleeting glimpse of the runaway royals. The tour was organized by Harry and Meghan's Archewell Foundation and the Colombian vice president's team. Francia Marquez, the first Black female to hold that post, and was called "my friend" by Meghan during one of their few speeches accompanied by sound. Information about the trip was posted daily on WhatsApp by the VP's office. But several journalists whose coverage caused displeasure were unceremoniously removed from the group. Others were reprimanded for daring to ask questions of a head teacher, even though they were freely answered whose school Sussexes visited in Cartagena. Okay, maybe I'm wrong, but isn't some of Harry's whole shtick that he wants to ask questions of the government about why his security was taken away? I'm sorry, don't they ask questions all the time? Don't they want answers from the royal family? But oh, dare you ask a question of a head school teacher that they're visiting? How dare you? And it's incredibly disturbing that the vice president of Colombia went along with it. I obviously don't live in Colombia. I don't really have a stake in any Colombian politics, but I imagine she'll probably end up getting raked over the coals for this whole fiasco because this was incredibly, I hate to say it, but kind of dumb on her part to go along with this mess because she gained nothing. She annoyed her people. She spent their money on something absolutely frivolous because the reasoning for this visit were utterly and completely frivolous. I watched Harry and Meghan's TV show and I wanted to invite her down because I wanted to fangirl for a while. I mean, that's essentially the entire reasoning the vice president admitted to. And she wanted to fangirl. She wanted to fangirl. She liked them. She thought they were cool. She invited them and they said, "Oh, no," because, they didn't really ever want to go to Colombia because they didn't really care about your country, but they needed something to do. They needed to feel important. And your invitation was still sitting there. And Megan's like, "I think we can do this, Harry. Let's do this." And so he went along with it. But that journalists were kicked out of a WhatsApp group for writing articles that they didn't like. I mean, come on now. Like, you have to be transparent. If you're wanting to walk down this pseudo royal path, you have to play the royal game. Otherwise, you're going to get crushed for it. So, this is how most royal engagements work. And I've been on several, so I can actually attest to this personally. Is that yes, there is a photographer that works with the royal family. There is even a videographer that works with the royal family and maybe covers this event to put on social media. Perfectly fine. Maybe they get a couple quotes from people who interacted and different things. Great. And then the media goes and they also do that. They talk to people who the royal couple interacted with. They meet with, they observe the whole exchange. Sometimes there's not enough space in a particular venue for all the journalists from, you could say, the Royal Rota to go in there and cover a particular event. Like the Dog and Duck was a pretty small venue, I believe. So when I was there waiting for William and Catherine, I don't think there was like a ton of press that were allowed to go inside. But they were there, they were able to observe. And so I was actually talking with the woman who had kind of the mimic Catherine ring, and I believe she had purple hair. And they talked to her later, the media, because they saw her interacting with Catherine and they saw that this was a long, interesting interaction. So they went over and talked to her because they are, again, the royals had their communications team, which should be putting out their approved information. But alongside that, you also have the media giving you pockets of different perspectives about the same event. So that way you have a multitude of angles to look at. And so you, as the observer, reading in the newspapers and various things, can get some additional context and information about these particular engagements. And yes, especially when it comes to politics, there are certain times where the public cannot be asked in because of either the danger, the national security issue, those sorts of things. Completely understandable. But, politicians do the same thing. They go to an event oftentimes and people are there, and then the press talks to different people that they talk to. Like, there is this level of transparency, but Harry and Meghan didn't want that. You gotta wonder why. What was so bad about talking to people they talked to? Except for the fact that maybe they would figure out, and part of the fact that, Megan doesn't really speak Spanish and that the couple were having issues is that probably they would get a lot of responses of, we don't know why they're here. They were nice, I guess, but we don't really care. Like they might get a lot of that because nobody really knew why they were there, even the people. And so Harry and Meghan probably would end up somewhat looking foolish out of the whole thing. So it's just a question of what Harry and Meghan want to be. Do they want to be purveyors of information, misinformation? Because they are utter and complete hypocrites at this point. They're completely and utterly hypocrites because they call for accountability and those sorts of things against the royal family, and yet they don't exercise it in their own life. So, how can I believe you really care about this issue when you won't exercise it at all in your own life? And I know Sussex Squad people and others will go, well, they would print bad things. I was like, so why don't your actions overshadow maybe some of the negativity? Could that happen? Yeah, it could. But you'll never know because now you've completely shut out that avenue. And the media now has even more incentive to post negative things about you. That's sort of the dumb thing. They're doing all this to avoid quote unquote negativity when they're actually really stirring up more negativity. I just don't know why they don't understand that. But again, in Harry and Meghan, they struggle a lot. They struggle a lot. And so it kind of goes on. It says, what the couple, now back in California, managed to achieve remains unclear. 100% it does. Critics called it a publicity stunt for both the Sussexes and Ms. Marquez. What were you thinking? I just don't understand what she was thinking with this whole fiasco. Like, it's one thing to invite them, it's another thing to treat them as heads of state, which she did for no discernible reason. You watch them on a Netflix show and you're giving them a head of state level visit. Why? If your country lives, as this article says, 42% below the poverty line and worried about costs and livelihood and all these sorts of things, why in the world do you think they would care about a duchess talking about how mean people on social media can be? I hate being bullied on social media. That's kind of sort of what she talked about. And she wants to empower women. It's like, well, I don't feel empowered when I can't eat. This is the thing too. It happens even in sort of missionary sort of situations. Sometimes what you need to do is address the immediate need. People don't have water. Well, the first thing I need to do before telling them about Jesus is to go get them water. Go get them food, get them stable, and then they'll be more open. Because if they don't have water and you're trying to evangelize to them, they'll have a bit of a disconnect because they're like, I'm thirsty. Can you please give me water? And you can say, yeah, I'm going to give you water here with this jug of water, but I'm also going to give you the water of life. You can obviously that's a little cheesy and corny, but it is technically what you should do if you're really interested in serving people because their immediate needs, what's actually concerning them is what needs to be addressed first. So even let's say in a different instance, an NGO goes into a community and they're struggling because of famine that year. And the first thing that the NGO does is bring a bunch of mosquito nets. And they're thinking to themselves, we're fine with mosquitoes. Those mosquito nets sure are good in a different time of year, but right now we're dealing with drought and I can't eat. So the mosquito nets mean nothing to me because my stomach is still empty. But if the NGO still is focused on let's say the mosquito nets and doesn't meet the other actual need, then why do they care? That's the same thing here. If so many of the people live in poverty, if there's cartel activity, crime, violence, and those sorts of things that are their actual concern, they will not give a crap about how Meghan Markle is treated on social media. And they probably also won't give a crap about how their vice president is treated on social media. I can't eat. That is my first concern. If I'm a citizen who can't eat, that kind of thing. It says the bill for security will be astronomical. In fact, people will not easily forget, an opposition politician said, and they will rail against her for the end of time for that. Many locals had never heard of the couple until their arrival, while the Sussexes experienced local culture and discussed cyberbullying and mental health online. Other more pressing issues were ignored, which means that their visit will be ignored. Because part of the thing that royals do when they're on tour as well is that they hear from the people, the local community, hey, what is your big issue you're thinking about? What is the thing that is pressing on you. And good royal staff members will cater the visit based on what interests the royal, but also what interests the local community, what also impacts the local community. They're not just focused on themselves. Harry and Meghan were entirely self-focused and self-serving on this visit. They had nothing else to offer but their own internal desires. They offer nothing else to these people. So how are these people to a certain extent supposed to get anything out of this visit? How are they supposed to be enthused about this visit? Sure, Meghan showed up and wore $90,000 worth of clothes, but also I'm sure many of them are thinking at the same time, it's like, I could really use that level of money to buy a house, buy groceries, buy water, buy protection, maybe buy transportation. Like there's so many different things that they could be using that money for, but Meghan decided to flaunt it. And again, that will not play well for anyone. Says Colombia faces economic and social issues with high levels of crime. And the Foreign Office advises against all but essential travel to much of the nation. Right wing Senator and 2026 presidential hopeful Maria Fernanda Cabal said that the visit brought absolutely no cultural exchange or anything of the sort. It is a part of the showmanship of the vice president who is disconnected from the reality of the country. And that's 100% correct. The vice president literally wanted to fangirl. She literally wanted to fangirl and commiserate with Meghan over how they're treated on social media. I mean, like the political ads write themselves really against the vice president. They really do. Because you can go, she's more obsessed and concerned with how people treat her on social media than if you eat tonight. The political ads write itself. Harry and Meghan played into that. Meghan and Harry might end up being the kiss of death. Invite them to your country. Wouldn't you know it? Next year, you're out of office. Yep. The Telegraph also had a piece, which I thought was equally good. More questions and answers is a basic premise from Victoria Ward. Why is Colombia and why now? Many feel as baffled today as they did before the couple set foot in Bogota. Part of the answer may lie in the fact that the entire trip was carefully filtered through their own PR lens, which sucks. You guys suck at PR. Your blurbs on your Sussex.com website sucked. They sucked. They said nothing. Time and time again. Offered nothing. Like, I expect a longer article. Like, they were like 400 to 500 words. Like, come on now. Seriously. Unlike a traditional royal tour of old, the media were not invited, save for one handpicked reporter whose job it was to relay each event to newspapers and other outlets across the world. The chosen journalist was an online reporter from the US publication Harper's Bazaar, who duly filed a brief overview of each engagement. As the Sussexes had no doubt intended, it was a saccharine, sweet account that took a broad brush approach to detail. So there were no real context, no additional facts. Like these were very broad, very banal, which you almost can't use as a journalist. You can't really use them. There were very few quotes from anybody, forcing media organizations keen to present a full account, scratching around for snippets of video and local accounts published online in an attempt to piece it all together. Because you can't really report on it if they don't give you any information. With no access, there is no independent scrutiny. That is so key. The couple are now operating as private individuals, no longer reliant on public funds, can do as they please. It was part of the reason they turned their backs on the royal household and its many constraints, after all. But by throwing a veil over the tour, they have simply thrown up more questions than answers because they didn't like the constraints, not the job. They didn't like the constraints, but the constraints are part of the job. The constraints are there for good reason, which this tour, of course, fully exposes. The glimpses of the real heart of the tour, such as Prince Harry's punchy quotes about social media and an online safety summit in Bogota, surely endeared him to the wider public, who could not agree with his condemnation of the vile digital sphere in the wake of violent riots that swept the UK following the Southport stabbings. Yet they were not released by Archwell, the Sussexes Foundation, or reported by the designated journalist. It all raises the question, what did the Sussexes want the world to see? That's an interesting reflection because, yeah, some of their quotes would get out. And obviously, the reporter here, I think, should have been a bit more, you could say, I don't think she should have said who could not agree with the vile condemnation of what's going on online, because I think most people think Harry really doesn't know what's going on. But the fact that that wasn't included or reported by the designated journalist, well, that's the only meat of the tour. What else are we supposed to get? There's no quotes, there's no nothing, there's no depth to this. It's so surface. And that is actually a huge issue. At an Afro Women in Power event in Cali on Sunday, Meghan spoke on the importance of using your voice, hailing her husband as a great example of how men can empower women, which I think is key because She doesn't want to empower him. She doesn't want to support him. His whole job is to support her. Yep. She also described her pride in the fact that their 3-year-old daughter, Lilibet, had finally found her voice. Maybe it's she's screaming or something, demanding things. Who knows? There were multiple outfit changes every day and many official photographs of the Duke and Duchess. There was a spotlight on their work to improve internet safety and an engagement with Colombia's Invictus Games team. But there was no clear threat, no obvious aim. And yes, because this is meandering all over the place. But that's been their whole brand and career is meandering all over the place. Colombia is not a country in which the four working royals are well known. Many, including performers chosen to entertain them, questioned who their VIP guests actually were. Who is Meghan? Justo Valdez, a 70-year-old singer, asked shortly before their arrival in San Bastillo de Palenque, the first free town in the Americas. Local journalists admitted their coverage of the tour had not generated much interest. One who did not want to be identified told the Telegraph that the country faced far more pressing problems. People are expecting the government to address those issues rather than focusing on a high-profile event with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Although addressing and comforting cyberbullying in children is an important issue, it's not the most pressing problem we face, which again, huge problem. They have this huge problem, and Harry and Meghan are not even close to addressing it. They're ignoring it. They're completely and utterly ignoring it. And there was one other thing I wanted to catch here, which is that the coverage hadn't generated much interest. And that's part not only because they didn't really know who Harry and Meghan were and they didn't really care, but also because they weren't addressing the more critical issues of the people. So if they're not addressing the more critical issues of the people, then the people don't care. But of course, Harry and Meghan don't care about the people of Colombia because that wasn't the point. The point wasn't to support the people of Colombia or to do anything with Colombia, really. It was just a willing patsy for them. They just needed a place to wax on about their issues again. One person who was front and center was the Vice President, Francia Marquez, whose office orchestrated the entire trip. Motivation is perhaps more transparent. By inviting two such high-profile celebrities to her country, she's put herself and her own causes firmly in the global spotlight. She said she viewed the Sussexes as a joint symbol of resistance and rebellion and felt moved to get in touch after watching their Netflix series, Harry and Meghan. But they're not rebelling. They're copying. They're cosplay royals. They're literally copying exactly what the royals do because they have no ability to create anything there on their own. They're completely devoid of creativity, both of them, apparently, and seem to have no talent. Meghan can give a good speech, and Harry can really get on well with veterans, but they really don't seem to have a ton of talents between them, because if they would, they've actually come up with a real job, not this sort of fake one. But Marquez is a divisive figure, and her opponents seized upon the invitation as proof she was not focused on the domestic issues at hand, of course, because this was a dumb idea. This was an incredibly dumb idea. So Maria Fernanda Cabal, who we heard from earlier in the other article, she went on to say the vice president is Black and as a minority should set an example of greatness, of affection towards the population, especially the poor, without resentment or hatred. She should seek out even minimal projects that the community needs. Stand by the people, not by royalty. That's 100% correct. And Harry and Meghan claim to be the people standing for the people, but really they're the most elitist out there. Catherine and William, I think, hang out with the people. They did participate in some sort of Nerf war in Norfolk. But Harry and Meghan, they're the ones who are obsessed with status. They're the ones who don't really care for anybody beneath them. So that's the last article I wanted to go over here. So I'm sure at least some of you are wondering or thinking, well, since Brittany, this is all propaganda, why do you keep talking about this? Why are you keeping Harry and Meghan in the spotlight? Isn't the best thing in the world is to just ignore them? Well, yes, I agree. That is somewhat true. However, I also know as well, there are not as many people who are aware of what Harry and Meghan are doing, the truth behind the scenes. Some of them just see this propaganda and they believe it. They don't even question it. They're like, oh, yeah, this is great. Look, they're smiling. They're cute. Aw. They're not seeing sort of the maliciousness, you could say, behind the scenes. And that's why it's so important to call Harry and Meghan out. Because if, let's say, I don't do it or other people in the media don't do it, then they just get away with it. The most important thing is to call out the hypocrisy, call out the lies, call out the propaganda. And the other thing about this visit, and I was going to do a longer video on it, but maybe I won't, is how Harry and Meghan, in particular, on this tour, are utilizing Getty Images to make themselves money, in my opinion. So how are they doing this exactly? Because I mentioned this, and I'm sure some people are like, wait, what? Because they don't really understand, let's say, how editorial images work. So when it comes to, let's say, even my thumbnails, I oftentimes actually buy the images that I use. And the reason I do that is for potential copyright reasons. This is sort of in the world of YouTube, it's sort of nebulous, but I thought, well, I'll just cover my bases. And 9/10 of the time, I do actually buy the images that I'm using. And those images are not cheap. Now, there are some cheaper outlets, although they do have usually less latitude in how you can use the image. But when it comes to Harry and Meghan, in this particular tour, they used Getty images. Now, these are categorized by events. Let's go back to one on one. So we see this here. And when I click on it, although it pops up and you can't see it, of course, you can see who the image is accredited to. So this is accredited to Anadolu. And so I don't know who that is. It's, I guess, Edwin Rodriguez, and Anadolu must be the outlet locally. And so he took this particular picture. So he is credited with it here. So although it is being sold through Getty Images, and you can see how expensive these images are. A small one, which is small, not as good a quality, $175. Medium is better, but $375. Large is $499. You can also get, let's say, packages, so you can spend a little bit less, but these images are not cheap. And I'm sure how it works is that if you buy this particular image, Edward gets a cut and Getty Images gets a cut. I don't know how exactly that line is delineated exactly, but that would be sort of my guess, unless you're hired directly by Getty, and you always get paid directly by Getty. So if you have a contribution agreement, you get a cut. So for example, I signed up to be a contributor to Shutterstock, so I have submitted some of my images for people to purchase for editorial purposes, and they get a cut and I get a cut of those images. So I would be like a contributor. I wouldn't be hired directly by Shutterstock, but I do get a cut of the images sold. So you don't just sell them to the company and never get anything. That's kind of like if you make a TV show and don't get any residuals, because it is your, let's say, piece of artwork. And when it comes to royal visits, obviously, this is how it's done. People outside the royal sphere, yes, the royals have their own photographer, but their photographer generally, unless it's in specific instances, does not submit images to Getty in order to get a payment out of it. They don't do that. They just submit them to Getty, and usually royal images like the coronation ones, birthday ones are free. So you don't actually have to pay for them. You can get that large image that usually costs $500. You can get it for free, or you can get it for $450 if you pay, like, I can't remember how much it is. It's a lot of money for like 5 images that you can get. So you have to be very, very, I've done some small images, very rare. I usually try to go to Associated Press, Alamy. Shutterstock is also, I think, $199. Like, Getty, like, images are pricey. And Harry and Meghan know this. And so the more they control this event and control access to it, the more they could potentially make cash on the other end. So here's how. And some of these are new that I haven't seen earlier. And so here we got Harry and Meghan. And you can see this image is done by Eric Charbonneau. And he is a photographer. There's probably their security guy, but he is taking this picture. Harry is looking at her because, she's got a microphone again. And so, but what is truly interesting is the attribution. So it's Eric, of course, but also Archwell Foundations via Getty Images. And you have to purchase this. So, what Harry and Meghan are doing as well, and in addition to concealing information, is because they are so tightly controlling the events, they can monetize it by forcing outlets who want to cover their particular events where outside media are not asked to pay for this so that it pays them. Now, I don't know this for sure, but this would be my guess because they are both given an attribution. I imagine they are sharing the cut of whatever images are sold. That's my guess. I don't know that for sure, but I imagine that is what's happening because he is being paid for by Archwell. And so I would imagine they don't want him to fully control the image because, again, they are image obsessed. So they want to control the image. And so they are making money off this image. I would bet you 150%. And again, I just find that sort of despicable because not only are they exhibiting just propaganda because they're not allowing any journalists to get any insight into what they're doing, they're also profiting off of it. They're profiting off keeping things secret so they can make money. Again, that's just my opinion based on how some of these editorial images work. I just think they're making money off this. I think they are. They've found a way to make charity pay them, which is what Meghan always wanted. She hated royal duties in part because she did not get paid for them. Even though she got a big salary from, you could say, Charles to live off of, her and Harry, it wasn't enough for her. We've seen through Meghan's obscene number of clothing, the rare time she ever repeats anything, the obscene amount of her jewelry, the trinkets that she wears all the time, like the cheap and often, I think, ugly trinkets, necklaces that she wears constantly that are thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, that nothing of what Harry was getting was good enough for her. And she wanted to monetize to make more. How dare all these crowds show up and not pay me for the privilege? And so that was Meghan's always, that was her perspective. And again, you see this reflected here. She wants control because she hated the fact that she couldn't control the full narrative of herself as a royal. So she's exhibiting it now. And now as well, she couldn't get royalty to pay her the way she wanted to. So now she's monetizing it by the image, by keeping the media out. They make more money, you could say, because they can sell the image of them at particular events because the media were prevented from doing so. I again find that really despicable. And it shows who they truly are. They don't want accountability. They don't want transparency. They don't want to fight against misinformation, except if it affects themselves. They are fully willing to create North Korean level of propaganda if that suits their own needs. And Harry and Meghan deserve to be called out for that. That's why I call them out. That's why I talk about such critical issues, is that if people don't know, if they just follow the propaganda, they don't know. They don't know this is misinformation. They don't know it's half information. They don't know that Harry and Meghan aren't telling them the full truth because they just believe what they see rather than having the critical eye. And yes, some people do, especially those who are aware of what Harry and Meghan are pulling, but so many people don't. And that's why I share this, because I think it's so important for people to know that this is not how royalty operates. This is how propagandists who follow the track of North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, this is how they conduct royal engagements, by not allowing the media, not allowing the people they're interacting with to talk to the media, not caring about the needs of the local communities. Harry and Meghan only care about themselves. They are only interested in enriching themselves. And that is why this whole tour is really a piece of pretty disgusting propaganda. So guys, let me know what you think of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you so soon. Bye.